And coming to our fourth one today, I'm very happy and very honored to have with us Frank Pitsikalis, a very good friend and a highly esteemed colleague, a fellow Greek or half Greek, half Canadian, I should say. SPA is the ISPA Foundation Chairman, and he's the founder and CEO of ResortSuite. And Frank, welcome, and please
Thank
tell
you.
us a few words about yourself, what you do.
Thank you, Nico. Yeah, so I've been involved in the spa industry for over 20 years, and I'm involved. I've been on the ISPA board and now serve as the ISPA Foundation Chairman, and so we're involved with education as well, and we really advocate. So we love what you're doing with Raison d'Être and your spa education. It's wonderful. It's exactly what our industry needs. And so honored that you invited me here to talk a little bit about revenue management today and what that might mean for spas. So pleasure and great to connect with you, Nico, during these times, and certainly look forward to an engaging session.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So I mean, revenue management. I'm sure a lot of us are not really familiar with the term and what it means, and especially spa revenue management. So, I mean, if you could walk us through, explain to us what we mean by revenue management. What is it?
Sure. I mean, at the most basic level, it's really about, selling the right inventory to the right customer at the right time at the right price. And that sounds like a pretty loaded statement, but ultimately all it really means is the fact that spas have perishable inventory. Every hour that goes by that a service provider is not booked or a treatment room is empty, that's a lost revenue opportunity. And the reality is, spas have a number of qualifiers that I would say match other industry revenue management. So this perishable inventory, variable periods of demand, where there's some times when the spa is, almost empty, and other times where if you had 3 times the treatment rooms, you couldn't, or staff, you could not meet the demand. You're turning away appointments just because you don't have availability during those times. Mm-hmm. So, and anytime you're making advanced sales through reservations, all of these are qualifiers for revenue management. And when we look at other industries, even just sectors in hospitality and travel, they all utilize revenue management to a large degree. And obviously not to a large degree, it is a core concept. Most of these industries actually would not survive if they did not use revenue management, as a central business. And is that whole end of perishable inventory and finite inventory, right? So an airline only has a certain number of seats on a plane. Hotels, they would never dream of selling the same room every night of the year for the same price, right? It really depends on demand, and you might get a really cost effective, especially these days, you probably get a really favorable room rate. And then during periods of high demand, when everyone is traveling again, the hotel is full well in advance, it's sold out. Those last few rooms are going to be at a premium. And that's just, we understand that as consumers, travel consumers, we get it. And it's also trained us to book in advance, or if we book at the last minute and there's availability, we might get a better deal. All of these things, all of a sudden opens up opportunities for a wider audience to actually take advantage of what an industry has to offer. And the spa industry, as for all of us, we're trying to go beyond the sort of 25% of the world's population that have ever experienced spa, at least in the developed world, and trying to break through so that we can expand spa and wellness to a much larger audience. And I think what will come out of this whole COVID is more people will be thinking about their health, thinking about wellness, thinking about well-being, and that's, that'll be one positive that comes out, I think, out of all of this. But as we start to look at our industry and how we operate, we have to start to think about taking it a really hard look at how we do business, because right now we have a set menu, and basically if there's availability, we book it. Doesn't matter what the treatment or the service might be. We'll just go ahead and book that. So when you look at an airline, if they just sold all of their seats at the same price, and let's say it's a high price, they might only fill a very small portion of the plane. If you see at the top there, it's only filling the 5-6 rows because they're selling, and all of a sudden the rest sits empty. But then if they start having sort of a business class and another tier of rates, then all of a sudden there's a bigger opportunity to fill that plane at tiers depending on the. So airlines do this all the time, and I'm not actually suggesting that we go for spas, that we go into dynamic pricing. Some spas even today do a certain version of dynamic pricing. They might have weekend or weekday pricing, and that's certainly revenue management at work. But what we're really discussing or talking about is something that I call dynamic availability.
Mm-hmm. How Frank, I mean, like you said, we've seen it, or we see it in other industries. And in spas, I mean, mainly what we see is like, price promotions or special discounts, like you said, on the weekends, or maybe add-ons. How do you think this can apply in the spa industry? I mean, taking into consideration that we have a few treatment rooms or specific operation hours, and how would the industry welcome that? I mean, I guess many are not familiar with this, or don't know how to apply it.
Right. I think ultimately the way you need to think about your menu, and now is a great time to be thinking about your menu as you look at your various services. You might have the same treatment provider for the same amount of time that can do multiple services. And I put up an example here of a full leg and bikini wax. And that might be, let's say, a $75, 75 euro service. And then the same treatment provider could also do a high value facial, let's say an essential facial, which is $185 in price. And then the profit margin for the two services, the one you make $50 on and the other you make $150 on. So for the same hour of service, you're making $100 more in profit. And so if you were just more selective of the treatments you offer during high demand times, depending on low demand and high demand periods of your spa, you can actually really move the needle in terms of your profitability, because you're actually booking the same treatment provider in a better mix of services that will yield a higher profit. And the other side is also, as you analyze your menu today, look at it and think about what treatments might also have other effects, in the sense that if I book this facial, there's a much better chance, 1 out of 3 guests, when they book a facial, typically will also buy a product. And so there's this drag on retail sales when I do that service over another service. And so, all of these play into what's the optimal mix of services that you should offer. So it's not necessarily changing the price of any service, but if I just effectively looked at my demand and said, during low demands, all of my services are available. So if I have my set menu, if you think of those green, yellow, and red bars, if I just separate my menu into those buckets and saying, these are my high margin treatments, my low margin treatments, and my mid-range margin treatments, I can then, depending on the demand, I can essentially collapse what services are actually available during those times. So during my medium demand, I'm only doing my medium and high margin treatments. And then during my highest margin, my highest demand times, I may be effectively offering just my highest margin treatments. And this, this approach can have, quite a significant impact on the spa's profitability.
Yeah, and like you said, it's not just about peak times and having peak time higher pricing or so forth, but it's mainly about picking the right treatments and with the right price so that you can place them at the times that are high demand times and then offering those to your clients. And I wanted to ask you also is that, I mean, because I guess you need to train your staff or your receptionist, right, to do that. But I guess with the help of the right software, it would be easier.
Yeah, it's, that's a bit of a loaded question. And I didn't ask you to ask that question, but yeah, software does have a big part to play. It's kind of like the analogy if you had American Airlines, if all of their travel agents had to pick the right rate to offer, or does that, is that automated? And so it has to come out of the hands of your staff, because if they're making decisions, then it's going to be challenging, especially as we move to more digital channels where a guest can now book online or book through a mobile app. Effectively all these different channels honor all of the rules put in place, should be able to set it and forget it and just place and then as the business changes dynamically in real time, the software should adapt to the changing business conditions. So yes, you can still do it with your staff. You can still put some rules in place and coach them around, booking the right treatments at the right time. But at some point, automation has to come into it as well.
Yeah, I mean, it will, having been an operator myself, I can see that, it could be easier, if you have the software to support that, and sometimes or almost always it's automated, because, the guest comes in and they ask for a treatment they know, like a Swedish massage, so the receptionist just, takes that wish and books that massage, whereas if he has the software to help them, then he can book the treatments that are available at that time, right?
Right, exactly. And part of that, so if we looked at an example, right? So if I broke down the times in your spa and effectively said, okay, these are, and your spa directors today can, easily sit down and analyze the demand, look at the curve of a particular day, and they can do this every day of the week, what Saturday looks like, and they can track that certain times of the year. And so, they should be able to pull reports and really understand the demand. And so knowing that between 9 and 11 is lower demand time, let's say this is a given Saturday, and then during 11 to 4, those are my high demand times. And this might be different for people come off of the beach, demand times maybe between 4 and 7 p.m. a massage or a spa. And so really looking at understanding sort of the higher demand time week and time of day is critical. And so if we looked at the example of just having the free, the way most spas operate today is somebody calls for a service, we have available time, we just book it. And so you'll end up filling your time potentially with a number of low margin treatments during your peak times. And you might know on that Saturday, we are always full. Between 11 and 4, we know we're going to fill those times during our peak times are always going to be full. And we have to turn away guests constantly. So what's happening here is you've now booked all of these low margin treatments where you're only making $25 an hour inside of your peak times. And we might have, maybe one high margin treatment in there, maybe a medium margin treatment. But overall, you're only going to, sorry, give me one sec. You're only going to make, if I did the analysis, you're only going to make $275 of profit when I add all of those up, right? So if we now go to sort of the next example, if we now pushed and only booked medium margin treatments and high margin treatments during my peak times, I've now doubled my profit. Because as you can see, there's no low margin treatments being booked during my peak times. And what's also happened is, if you recall in the last slide, our low demand times were almost empty. People were not booking in the low demand periods, but it's now pushed those into those services and filled your low demand times. And so you've now assured yourself you're going to make the highest profit during your peak times, or higher profit. And then also your lower demand times in your spa are actually being filled with treatments. So you're still making money during those times. And if we take this one step further and said, we're only going to offer our signature treatments during our peak time. So our highest margin treatments are available. And so now we're pushing into the lower demand times, your medium and low margin treatments, and filling the spa. You can see now our profit is now $7, based on this model. So it and treatment room. We expand that across 10 treatment rooms and did a similar analysis at there's $77,000 additional profit. If you left it goes, you probably $1,500 to $2,000 worth of profit. So that's a massive increase in profitability. And it's just something we need to look at as an industry, because we leave a lot of money on the table, no pun intended. But that's the reality, is we don't operate our spas as efficiently as we can.
Okay, and I mean, we're talking about this now, and a lot might say, what are you talking about? We've got, lockdown in most of the countries, spas are closed, zero revenue. So why do we bother to talk about revenue management now?
Well, I think ultimately it's a good time to do that analysis work, right? And as spas begin to open, it's important that they start to look at their business and think about, because they may not open fully all at once. The opening might come in stages. And so I think revenue management is really about optimizing your resources. So if you only have a certain fixed amount of time, a certain amount of staff that you've hired back, you want to make sure that staff is being utilized optimally. So good time to analyze your spa menu, maybe change your spa menu, maybe ensuring that you have those various tiers in your pricing that you can more easily know that that's, a certain tier of service that fits certain demand times of the day. And so, really doing your low, medium, and higher margin treatments and understanding your menu. There's other things that you can do. It's not just about saying, well, my highest price services are the ones that are going to be booked. You can also look at length of service. So, they might say that, okay, during the highest demand times, we are only going to offer, we're not going to offer our 90 or 120 minute services during those times. We are only going to offer maximum 60-minute treatments. And what that ends up doing is you're probably making more profit per minute on a shorter service than a longer service. You may also essentially get more guests in the spa, right? By definition, if the services are somewhat shorter, you're able to serve more guests. So if you're a resort, more guests are satisfied because they can get a treatment, and you now have more retail opportunities because there's more guests coming through the spa. So there's lots of different dynamics. And I think that thinking about that today and thinking about as we open, and yes, you may not have the opportunity or the luxury to be thinking about or employing yield management to a large degree when you first open. Really, this is about survival. But as we've seen with COVID, the health of a spa, is about everyone, right? It's not just about the owners and the stakeholders in the spa, the investors, but it's also the staff. Like the spa has to be healthy and viable, and it's also for guests. Guests want to know that the spa is going to be around and that everything else. So it's sort of like we're all in this together, and so we need to make sure that we're operating, in a way that is going to make the spa successful.
And as you talked about staff, and I know that there's a lot of people actually attending now, and a lot of who registered through LinkedIn or Facebook. And there are quite a few, spa managers, spa directors participating now. So how would the spa manager, spa director be able to look at this and use revenue management?
Well, I think, as I said, I think menu design has a big part of it, is doing that analysis. I think create a spreadsheet of all of your treatments, break down the cost or the price of the service, then break down the average make on that service. Your staff cost, is there product that's used, and all of those things, and really get a really good understanding of each service, and then sort it. And you might see that you're going to get this very distinct ranges of your service. If you design your menu a certain way, you're going to see the tranches of, okay, here are my higher margin treatments, here are my mid and my low margin. And then you might also look at that other dynamics, other variables, like the drag on retail sales of doing a facial or a certain type of body treatment that might inspire a guest to buy retail as well. And so all of those would come into it. And I think you start to have a very clear picture of what's my optimal mix of treatments that we want to be booking during low and then during high demand times. And the answer will become pretty clear. And if you just did a few different variations of that, playing with the numbers and seeing if I book this many of my signature treatments versus a lower number with lower margin treatments, what's my difference in profit? So same service provider, same treatment areas, but very different results. And so I think the answer becomes fairly clear about what the optimal mix of treatments for your particular spa might be.
Okay. And I mean, we're talking all this time, Frank, about making more money and how we can sell better to the clients. And I mean, at the same time, as we are in the wellness industry, and we're trying to make people feel well and feel good. And how do you think, spa professionals would embrace this, and would they be able? I mean, we're talking to therapists quite often about, promoting some treatment or promoting spa products related to the treatment they just did, and they have a difficulty in doing that. So how are, spa supervisors or managers or directors be able to handle this?
That's a good question. And I think, I think ultimately it comes down again to, the health of the business, right? And so when you're doing dynamic availability, it's not so in your face about, oh, well, the price is higher today because, we're busy, so we're charging you a higher price. We're not talking about dynamic pricing. We're just saying, oh, I don't have that service available, but I do have this treatment, or would you be interested in this or that? So it's just about offering other options. And the reality is, as I said, they might still get that wax service that they want, but it might be at 6:30 in the evening, not at 2:00 in the afternoon, where it's your highest demand time. So you're still going to book those guests into other times, just not during your higher demand time. So it's and guests get it. When we think about, if you go back to the days of airline before deregulation came in, a flight from London to New York or New York to Los Angeles had a set rate. All the airlines had to charge the same amount, and it was expensive. You know, even in those terms, it was probably over $2,000 to fly from New York to LA. And then deregulation came in the 70s, and all of a sudden you had all these, you know, these budget airlines that were cropping up and offering cheap rates. So that's where American Airlines essentially said we need to come up with a strategy, and then that's where yield management came into play in the airline industry. And if you think about it today, back then maybe 10, 15, 20% at the most of, you know, general population had ever flown in an airplane, right? And today with deregulation, be able to get, if I book, you know, well in advance or at the last minute, I can get a $99 flight from New York to LA. You know, all of these things, we've essentially opened up air travel to a whole other demographic. And to be honest, you know, you'd be hard pressed to find anybody that hasn't traveled on an airplane, other than right now. But that's the thing. It's opened up travel to everyone, and that's really how it should be. And I think spas are the same. I mean, I think by doing this, you're not only talking about making the highest profit during your peak times, but it may be that you also offer services that people, if they know that they book early in the morning or late in the day or on a Tuesday, they can get the service that they want at a cheaper price. Then they'll book then. So it's about training the consumer, and eventually people understand it. You know, we don't complain, or we do, okay, well, they're gouging me now to fly to London, but you know, we don't necessarily complain, but we accept the fact that airlines, hotels, car rental companies all employ yield management in the way that they do business. So spas should be no different.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, especially when dealing, for example, with a hotel spa, I mean, the guest is around the hotel the whole day, and if he has the option of, you know, choosing a low peak time where he can get the same treatment for a lower price, he might want to do that, you know, given that option. Or even when booking the hotel room, you know, if he's given the option of booking ahead treatments, perhaps, you know, that could be another good deal for him, right?
Right. No, absolutely. And you know, we're also dealing with a whole other consumer now. Like when things start opening up, we're going to be presented with consumer expectations that we didn't even have before, right? And I know, like with ISPA, we've just done some consumer research with PwC, and actually the highlights of that research is available on the ISPA website. So if you go to experienceispa.com, you'll be able to get, you know, right now, what is the consumer feeling about coming back to a spa? And so there's a lot of great insights there about the type of guests that we're going to be dealing with, and the that they have right now. It's important to be in the mind consumer and understanding that sentiment. We can adapt, and we will have to adapt. And I think, as I said, I think revenue management is going to be a key, you know, and there's, you know, lots of other resources. Our website, we have a COVID course. There's reopening checklists and a whole reopening plan with lots of templates and lots of good information. So I certainly go to the ISPA website and explore some of those resources and look at the highlights of that research. The full study is obviously available only to ISPA members, but we want to make all of the highlights, you know, available to the whole industry for sure.
I'm sure that's a very valuable report. I mean, and people can go in and take a look. And like you said, I mean, reopening might be, you know, gradual. It would be in stages, and maybe it's time now to prepare for some, you know, yield or revenue management, and be able to utilize, you know, specific perhaps hours, operating hours better, or utilize reduced staff. when we reopen, and also under different circumstances. I mean, I was listening to, I'm not sure if it was Anna Bjurstam who said that, you know, you might have like one super sanitized room in the spa, you know, so it might be higher demand for that, or so we're not sure exactly how it's going to look like, right, when we open up.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be, it's uncertain. It's an unknown that we are all trying to prepare for, trying to predict how it will go. But we need to be flexible and able to adapt. And that's why I say, you know, if we're opening in stages, ensuring that the resources that we do have, we are maximizing, you know, their effectiveness and their profitability and all of that, because it all comes into play. Sometimes we need a shock to the system, not that anyone needed COVID, but having this sort of really kind of wake up call for all of us. I mean, even our business, you know, we're looking at, you know, we haven't laid off any employees. We have 53 employees, but everyone's working remotely. And we sit there and think, do we need to have this huge office where everybody's there? There's probably lots of positions that potentially could, in the long run, be done remotely. And maybe there's certain coming in for meetings or other things, but it's kind of rethinking your business. And I think spas need to do the same, especially the financial aspect of it. This is a great opportunity to sit down and plan and look at, you know, the ways that we do business, because again, sometimes I want to give our industry a bit of a shake. We leave so much money on the table by doing this blind. We have a menu, pick anything on the menu. If it's available, book it. And that's all well and good, but it really limits your ability to maximize your business potential. It's just not a good strategy. We need to start to adapt and look at. It's not like we're doing this for the first time. All these other segments of hospitality and travel have all done this, and it's a very mature concept. And it's time our industry, you know, starts to catch up.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, I remember that I listened to someone saying to the receptionist, you know, don't just be an order taker, you know, or you need to be a consultant, and you need to think about the business as well, you know. So it's like you said.
Absolutely.
Well,
any questions from any questions coming up on your feed?
I didn't get any. I mean, I cannot see on this site, but I'll get the questions if I have questions afterwards. So I can share them with you, Frank, and then we can get back to them if you want.
Sounds great. Sounds great.
Well, thanks a lot for being with us today, Frank, and sharing your insights. I mean, very valuable and very useful as we will enter this new period quite soon. So thanks again, and hopefully I'm going to see you very soon.
Thank you, Nico. I appreciate it. And yeah, we'll talk soon. Bye, everyone. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.